The ballroom shimmered with gold and champagne light, chandeliers glittering like captured stars above the heads of the city's elite. The soft hum of violins filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and whispered conversations about deals, power, and money. At the center of it all stood Elena Voss, the woman everyone wanted to be, and secretly envied. Her crimson silk gown caught the light with every subtle movement, hugging her frame with a confidence that seemed untouchable. Cameras flashed discreetly as people stole photos of her, the youngest female CEO in the country, the face of unshakable success. But behind the poised smile, Elena's hands trembled as she adjusted her glass of champagne. She'd been running on little sleep for days, surviving on caffeine, ambition, and the quiet ache that success never filled. The crowd was a blur of familiar strangers, investors, rivals, politicians, every one of them eager to toast her, none of them really seeing her. The laughter around her grew louder, and the room seemed to tilt, as if the world itself were swaying to a rhythm she couldn't keep up with. A colleague, or maybe an acquaintance, tapped her shoulder. "Elena, darling, tell us what it feels like to have everything." The question, meant to flatter, felt heavy in her chest. Everything. She almost wanted to laugh. She hadn't seen her parents in months, hadn't spoken to anyone outside work in longer. Her life was made of schedules and meetings, not moments. The air suddenly felt too thick to breathe. She tried to focus on the crystal in her glass, the reflection of lights dancing within it. The violin music began to sound distant, muffled like it was coming from behind a wall. A strange warmth spread across her face and her vision blurred at the edges. She pressed a hand to her temple, whispering a quiet apology to no one in particular, and then the ground shifted. Her champagne slipped from her hand, shattering like delicate glass stars on marble. The room gasped as one, the crowd parting in elegant panic. Someone shouted her name, or maybe it was only in her head, before everything went black. And in that darkness, for the first time in years, Elena felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Fear. Fear of falling. Fear of being seen not as the perfect, untouchable woman, but as someone fragile, someone human. As her body went limp on the polished floor, the chandeliers above her blurred into streaks of gold. The last thing she remembered before losing consciousness completely was the sound of her own heartbeat slowing, faint, desperate, almost pleading, as the world of wealth and glitter faded away into silence. The first thing Elena felt was warmth, a heavy, unfamiliar kind that pressed against her cheek. Then came the hum of something mechanical, the soft whirring of gears and the faint smell of oil mixed with soap. Her eyelids fluttered open and she squinted against the dim light filtering through a dusty window. The ceiling above her wasn't the ornate gold of the ballroom, but plain metal, stained with age. A fan spun lazily, its rhythm uneven but oddly comforting. Her body ached, her head pulsed with dull pain, and when she tried to move, the scratchy texture beneath her fingers made her freeze. It wasn't silk or velvet. It was a rough blanket that smelled faintly of engine grease. Panic gripped her chest as her mind raced. Where was she? What had happened after she fainted? She pushed herself up, wincing as her vision steadied, and took in her surroundings. It was a garage, the kind of place she'd only ever passed by on her way to corporate meetings, where men in overalls worked beneath cars, and radios played old songs between bursts of static. Tools hung neatly on the walls, a half-dismantled motorcycle rested nearby, and the faint smell of gasoline mixed with the comforting aroma of brewed coffee. The contrast was almost jarring after the glittering chaos of the ballroom. Then a small sound broke through her confusion, a hum. Soft, tuneless, innocent. She turned her head and saw a little girl sitting cross-legged on the floor beside her, coloring on a crumpled piece of paper. The child couldn't have been more than 5, with messy blonde pigtails and a streak of red crayon on her cheek. When she noticed Elena stirring, she set her crayon down carefully and smiled. That kind of pure, unguarded smile only children have. "You're awake," the girl said brightly, scooting closer. "Daddy said you were a princess who fell down." Elena blinked, trying to process the words. Her throat felt dry, and when she finally spoke, her voice came out hoarse. "A princess?" The girl nodded seriously. "Mm-hmm. You were all shiny and sparkly, like in my storybook." Elena's eyes followed the child's gesture to her own dress, the once glamorous red gown now wrinkled with faint smudges of grease on the fabric. A wave of disbelief washed over her. A princess? She felt anything but. Before she could say another word, a deep voice cut through the air. Close enough, it said, steady but kind. Elena turned toward the sound, and there he was, a man stepping out from behind a car, wiping his hands on a rag. His gray shirt was streaked with oil, his jeans worn and faded. He was tall, built like someone who worked hard for everything he had, and his eyes, dark and calm, met hers with quiet curiosity. "You fainted outside," he said, leaning casually against the workbench. "Looked like you hadn't eaten in days. I didn't think leaving you on the sidewalk was a good idea." Elena's mouth opened, but words tangled in her throat. No one ever spoke to her like that. Simple, unfiltered, without calculation. "I was at the gala," she began, her voice trailing off as she looked around again. How did I get here?" "I carried you," the man said, shrugging slightly as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You were out cold. My daughter wanted to help, so here you are." He gestured toward the girl, who giggled proudly and held up a crayon drawing. "I made you a get-better picture." Elena couldn't help the small, disbelieving smile that tugged at her lips. "Thank you," she murmured softly, meeting the girl's bright eyes. The warmth in that child's expression was something she hadn't felt in years. Not in her boardrooms, not in her lavish home, not even in the mirror. The man took a step closer, his voice calm but firm. "You're safe here. Rest a bit. I'll get you some water." And as he turned away, Elena felt something shift inside her, a strange, quiet awareness that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't being seen as a CEO, a symbol, or a success story. She was just a woman who'd fallen, and someone had cared enough to catch her. Elena's eyes followed the man as he crossed the small garage, his steps steady and sure. The faint metallic clang of tools filled the air as he moved aside a toolbox to reach for a bottle of water. He wasn't saying much. He didn't need to. Everything about him spoke of quiet self-reliance, the kind that came from years of fixing things that other people broke. She sat there on the old couch he must have dragged in long ago, the blanket pooled around her waist, her gown rumpled and streaked with grease, the glittering image of who she had been just hours ago, the poised, immaculate CEO under chandeliers, felt like a lifetime away. Now she was in a man's garage, her hair loose, makeup smudged, staring at a cracked concrete floor that smelled faintly of oil and rain. When he came back, he handed her the bottle, his calloused fingers brushing hers for the briefest second. "Drink slowly," he said simply. His voice wasn't rough, but it carried a weight that demanded calm. She obeyed without thinking. The water was cool, grounding. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice still faint. "You didn't have to do this." He raised an eyebrow, leaning back against the workbench. "What was I supposed to do? Leave you passed out in the street? Not really my style." The words hung in the air, and for some reason they struck her deeper than they should have. People had ignored her before, in meetings, in moments when she needed someone to ask if she was okay, but he hadn't, and he didn't even know her name. "I'm sorry," she said after a moment, glancing around. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." He gave a small, almost amused smile. "You didn't. My daughter thought you were some kind of fairy. She insisted we help." He nodded toward the little girl who was now carefully trying to color a paper flower. Mia doesn't take no for an answer. The girl looked up with a proud grin. "I told Daddy you needed magic juice." Elena blinked, confused. "Magic juice?" "Water," he explained, suppressing a smile. "She's got her own names for things." Mia giggled and went back to drawing, her tiny legs swinging from the stool. The warmth in the air softened something in Elena's chest. It had been years since she'd been around such innocence. A space untouched by status or ambition, where kindness wasn't a currency. "Do you remember what happened?" he asked gently, keeping his tone casual but his eyes searching hers. She hesitated. I was at a gala. There were too many people, too many lights. I guess I hadn't eaten." She trailed off, the admission feeling strange on her tongue. Vulnerability wasn't her language. He nodded, not pressing her. "That'll do it. Fancy places always forget real food." A laugh escaped her. Small, surprised, but real. "You're not wrong." That smile flickered again, brief but genuine. "I'm Luke," he said, extending his hand, his palm still faintly stained with grease. "Elena," she replied, shaking it. His grip was firm, warm, the kind of handshake that didn't size you up or expect anything back. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the quiet ticking of a clock on the wall and the soft scratch of crayons from Mia's corner. Elena found herself watching the man again, the way his brow furrowed slightly as he focused on cleaning his tools, the easy strength in his movements, the peace in the air that seemed to belong only to people who had learned to live simply. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything. She just sat there, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, letting the world slow down. Outside, rain began to patter softly against the garage door. The city that had once demanded everything from her seemed far away, unreachable, almost irrelevant. And in that quiet, Elena realized that somehow, without meaning to, this stranger and his little girl had pulled her out of more than just the street. They'd pulled her out of the life she'd been trapped in. The morning sunlight slipped through the dusty glass windows of the garage, painting streaks of gold across the concrete floor. Elena woke up slowly, her head resting against the armrest of the couch. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The faint scent of motor oil, the distant hum of the city waking up, the sound of a child humming softly. It was all foreign, yet strangely peaceful. Her eyes drifted to the corner where Luke was crouched beside his daughter, helping her tie the laces on her little red shoes. The man's large, rough hands moved with surprising gentleness, his voice calm and patient as Mia giggled and swung her legs. Elena watched quietly, her heart tugging at the simple tenderness of the scene. It was a world far removed from hers, a world where love wasn't wrapped in conditions or expectations. When Luke noticed she was awake, he gave her a faint nod. "Morning," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't mean to wake you. You passed out pretty hard last night." Elena sat up, her cheeks warming with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry for imposing. I must have been a real inconvenience." He shrugged, his tone as casual as ever. "You weren't. Mia thought it was an adventure. Besides, you looked like you needed a place to rest more than anyone I've seen in a while." Elena's lips curved into a small smile. "Thank you, really. You and your daughter. You've both been so kind." Mia beamed at that, running up with her unicorn plush toy. "I told Daddy we had to help you." "You looked like a sleeping princess." Elena couldn't help but laugh softly, her voice still husky from sleep. "A princess, huh? That's a new one for me." Luke smiled faintly, though his eyes carried quiet curiosity. "So, Elena," he said, pulling up a stool near her, "what's a woman in a designer gown doing alone in the rain, passing out in front of a mechanic's garage?" She hesitated, her fingers knotting together in her lap. The truth felt heavy, too raw to explain in full. "I didn't plan to be there. It was just the party, the people, the pressure. I thought I could handle it, but everything just closed in. And then, I don't remember much." Luke studied her for a moment, his gaze steady but not judging. "Happens to everyone," he said finally. "Even the strongest engines overheat when they're pushed too hard." His words landed deeper than he probably realized. Elena blinked, looking away as a lump rose in her throat. "You sound like you know what that's like." He gave a small, almost nostalgic smile. "I used to run a business. Worked nonstop, lost myself in it. Until one day, I realized my daughter didn't even know what my laugh sounded like. That was my wake-up call." Elena's breath caught. "You left it all?" He said simply, glancing toward Mia, who was now making her unicorn fly across the workbench. "Walked away. Started over with what I had left." The simplicity of his words stunned her. It was everything she feared, and yet everything she longed for. She sat there for a moment, the silence between them soft and full of understanding. "You make it sound easy," she whispered. He shook his head, his voice low. "It wasn't, but it was right." For the first time, Elena looked around the garage not with discomfort but with a strange admiration. The oil stains, the worn tools, the faint music from an old radio. It wasn't chaos. It was life. Real, unpolished, and deeply human. When she caught her reflection in the dusty mirror across the room, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the polished executive with diamond earrings and steel eyes. The woman staring back at her looked softer. Tired, yes, but alive. "Maybe," she said softly, half to herself, "this is what I've been missing." Luke didn't respond, but his quiet smile said enough. Mia ran over again, holding up her drawing. 3 figures hand in hand standing under a big yellow sun. "That's you," she said, pointing to the one in the red dress. "And that's Daddy and me. We're friends now." Elena's throat tightened as she looked at the picture. "Yeah," she whispered, her voice trembling just a little. "Friends." But deep down, something was shifting, something she couldn't yet name. Rain began to fall again that afternoon. Soft at first, then steady, the kind that soaked through the city like a whispered lullaby. The rhythmic patter against the garage roof filled the space with a calm Elena didn't know she needed. She sat at the small wooden table near the workbench, sipping the coffee Luke had made for her. It wasn't the imported roast she was used to, but it was warm, rich, and somehow perfect. The steam curled between them as Luke wiped his hands and joined her, his movements unhurried, his presence steady. Mia sat on the floor with her crayons, humming to herself, her little world of color and imagination unfolding on sheets of paper. Every so often she'd look up at Elena and smile, like she wanted to make sure the woman was still there, still okay. It had only been a day, but something about that little girl's gentle concern reached places in Elena that had been silent for years. "You're quiet," Luke said, leaning back against the table, watching her with a faint, unreadable expression. Elena let out a small breath, swirling the coffee in her cup. "I guess I'm not used to quiet," she admitted softly. "My world doesn't stop. It never has." He nodded, resting his elbows on his knees. "That sounds exhausting." She gave a small, hollow laugh. "It is, but you learn to live with it. You tell yourself it's worth it. The power, the money, the image. But then one day you wake up and realize you don't remember the last time you felt real." Her voice cracked slightly and she quickly looked away, embarrassed. "Sorry, you don't need to hear my drama." Luke's tone was calm, steady. "Maybe not, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't say it." The words caught her off guard, simple yet piercing. No one had ever told her that before. Not in the boardroom, not at parties, not in her cold, echoing penthouse. She looked up at him, studying the man in front of her. Grease under his fingernails, hair slightly messy, eyes that carried both weariness and warmth. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was just there. Mia's small voice cut through the silence. "Daddy, can we show her the stars?" Luke smiled faintly. "Stars?" Elena repeated, raising a brow in confusion. Mia jumped to her feet, her excitement bubbling over. "Yeah, come see." She grabbed Elena's hand with a confidence only a child could have and tugged her toward the back corner of the garage. Luke followed, his expression softening as he watched them. Mia pointed up at the ceiling. Dozens of tiny glow-in-the-dark stickers shimmered faintly against the dim light. Stars, moons, and planets scattered across the metal panels. "We can't see the real ones from the city," she explained proudly, "so Daddy made us our own sky." Elena tilted her head back, her lips parting slightly. The gentle glow filled the room with a surreal peace. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Luke shrugged modestly. "Mia had nightmares for a while. Said the dark felt too big, so we brought the stars a little closer." Something in Elena's chest broke open then, not painfully but softly, like the quiet shattering of ice. "You two," she murmured, glancing between them. "You've built something really special here." Luke's eyes met hers for a brief moment, just long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. "We try," he said simply. Elena smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "You've done more than try." Mia giggled, pressing one of the star stickers into Elena's palm. "Now you have your own." Elena looked down at the tiny glow-in-the-dark star resting against her skin. It was small, imperfectly cut, a little wrinkled, but in that moment it felt like the most valuable thing she had ever been given. As thunder rumbled softly outside, Elena found herself sitting again, not as a stranger or a guest, but as if she belonged. Luke poured her another cup of coffee, and this time, she didn't feel like she owed him an apology for taking up space. The rain fell harder, the garage lights flickered, and somewhere between the laughter of a child and the quiet hum of an old radio, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe, seen, human. By evening, the storm had passed, leaving behind that quiet, silver kind of stillness that only comes after rain. The streets outside glistened under the amber glow of streetlights, and the air smelled of wet earth and gasoline. Inside the garage, time seemed to slow. The world outside felt a lifetime away, as though the city of suits, deadlines, and expectations had vanished beyond the sound of the dripping roof. Elena sat cross-legged on the couch now, wearing an old flannel shirt that Luke had lent her to replace her ruined gown. It was far too big. The sleeves rolled up several times, but it was soft, warm, and oddly comforting. Her hair, Still damp from the towel Mia had insisted she use fell in loose waves around her shoulders. She looked less like the untouchable CEO from the business magazines and more like someone rediscovering who she was beneath the layers of control. Mia sat at her feet, sorting through a box of mismatched toy cars. "This one's Daddy's favorite," she announced proudly, holding up a small red model that had lost most of its paint. "He says it's magic because it still works even though it's old." Elena smiled faintly. "Sounds like your dad knows how to fix things." Luke, who was leaning against his workbench polishing a wrench, looked up. "It's what I do," he said lightly, "though people tend to be harder to fix than cars." She tilted her head, watching him carefully. "You think I'm broken?" He paused mid-motion, his eyes flicking toward hers. "No," he said slowly. "Just worn out. There's a difference." The words hit her deeper than she expected. No one had ever seen through her like that before. Not her colleagues, not her investors, not even herself. "Worn out," she repeated softly, almost tasting the truth of it. "Yeah, maybe that's the right word." Luke set down the wrench and walked over, his steps unhurried, his voice calm. "You don't have to keep running all the time, you know. The world doesn't end if you stop to breathe." Elena gave a small laugh, though her eyes shimmered. "You sound like someone who's already learned that lesson." He leaned against the table beside her. "The hard way," he admitted. "Lost a lot before I figured out what really matters." She looked at him, searching his face. "And what does matter?" He didn't hesitate. "This," he said, nodding toward Mia, who was now making engine noises with her toy cars. Her laughter. "A roof over our heads, a day that ends with peace instead of pressure. It's not fancy, but it's real." Elena felt a sting behind her eyes. For so long she had convinced herself that real happiness came from success, from winning, achieving, being the best. But sitting here, in this dimly lit garage with a little girl's laughter echoing softly against metal walls, she realized how wrong she had been. Mia suddenly climbed onto the couch, holding up 2 toy cars. "Race with me," she demanded cheerfully. Elena laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. "You really think I can beat you?" "Maybe," Mia teased, handing her the old red car. "You get Daddy's magic one." Luke chuckled as Elena crouched down on the floor beside Mia, their toy cars lined up at the edge of a paint-stained board. "All right," Elena said, playfully narrowing her eyes. "Winner gets a cookie," Mia gasped. "But we only have 1 cookie left." "Then I guess we'll have to share," Elena said with a wink. They raced, both cars tumbling off the edge after 2 seconds, and the sound of their laughter filled the garage, a sound so full of light that it softened the edges of everything around them. Luke stood there for a long moment, arms crossed, just watching. There was something about seeing Elena like this, relaxed, happy. Her guard finally down. That stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years. Later, when Mia had fallen asleep curled up in a pile of blankets on the couch, Elena found herself standing beside Luke again. The quiet between them was different now. Not awkward, but familiar. Like they had both settled into a rhythm neither of them expected. "She's special," Elena said softly, glancing at Mia. "She's my reason," Luke replied, his voice low. "Everything I do is for her." Elena nodded, her chest tightening. "You're a good father." He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment their eyes held. "And you," he said quietly, "you're not what people probably think you are." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "You've got walls," he said, "but I can tell you built them because no one else ever gave you a safe place to stand." Elena swallowed hard, caught between wanting to look away and wanting to stay in that gaze forever. "You read people too easily," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "Only the ones who don't know how to rest." She didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat was too tight. Instead, she turned toward the window where the city lights glimmered faintly through the rain. Somewhere out there, her empire waited. Emails, meetings, expectations. But for once, she didn't feel the pull of it. In that little garage, surrounded by warmth and stillness, Elena realized she didn't want to go back to the noise. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Morning sunlight crept through the open cracks of the garage door, painting the floor in stripes of gold and shadow. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of oil and freshly brewed coffee. Elena stirred awake on the old couch, wrapped in a soft blanket that smelled faintly of rain and engine grease. For a moment she lay there half dreaming, Her mind caught between two worlds, the cold, polished luxury of her penthouse and the humble peace of this little garage. When she opened her eyes, she saw Mia sitting cross-legged on the floor, quietly braiding her doll's hair. The little girl looked up and grinned. "You sleep a lot," she teased. Elena laughed softly, rubbing her eyes. "I guess I do. It's been a long time since I had the chance." Luke's voice came from the corner. "Coffee's ready." He was standing near a workbench, sleeves rolled up, sunlight brushing across his arms as he poured steaming coffee into two mismatched mugs. His movements were unhurried, steady, a rhythm that felt like the opposite of everything Elena knew. "Good morning," she said, sitting up and pushing her hair back. "Morning," he replied, handing her a mug. "It's not the fancy kind you're probably used to, but it'll wake you up." She took a sip, her lips curving into a quiet smile. "It's perfect," she said. And it was. Strong, simple, real. Mia bounced up and tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can we show her the garden?" Luke arched a brow. "Garden? You mean the 3 plants you've managed not to kill yet?" Mia gasped in mock offense. "They're flowers," she protested. "They're alive!" Elena laughed. "I'd love to see them." Outside, the morning was crisp and bright. Behind the garage, a small patch of soil bloomed with color. Not much, just a few wildflowers, some daisies, and one stubborn rosebush pushing through the weeds. The sunlight hit the petals just right, turning them into tiny jewels. Mia ran ahead, crouching beside the flowers. "This one's Lily," she said, pointing to a drooping daisy. "And that's Rosie. She's the boss." Elena knelt beside her, touching one of the petals gently. "They're beautiful," she said softly. "You take good care of them." Luke stood behind them, arms crossed, watching with quiet amusement. "She talks to them every day, says they grow better when someone listens." "Maybe she's right," Elena murmured. Luke's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. "She usually is." For a long while, the 3 of them stood there in the small garden, the sun warming their faces. It was such an ordinary moment. A mechanic, his little girl, and a woman who had built empires. And yet, for Elena, it felt extraordinary. She turned to Luke. "You built all of this yourself, didn't you?" "The garage, the garden, everything," he nodded, looking around. "Piece by piece. After Mia's mom left, it was just us. This place, it became home. I guess it's not much, but it's ours." Elena's heart ached at the quiet strength in his words. "It's more than much," she said softly. "It's full of life." Luke gave her a small, almost shy smile. Can't remember the last time someone said that. Mia suddenly looked up, her eyes wide. "You can come visit the flowers whenever you want," she offered earnestly. "They like nice people." Elena's breath caught, her throat tightening in that tender way she didn't expect. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." As they walked back into the garage, Elena felt something she hadn't in years. Belonging. Not the kind that came from being admired or obeyed, but the quiet kind that came from being accepted. Luke went back to his tools, humming under his breath as he worked. Mia resumed drawing, her crayons scattered across the table. And Elena, instead of rushing off to the world that demanded her every second, sat down beside them. No makeup, no title, no mask, just Elena. Every few minutes, Luke would glance at her from across the room. She didn't notice, not really, but he did. The way her smile had changed, softer now, easier. The way her eyes looked less tired, more alive. And though neither of them said it out loud, something unspoken was growing there between them, slow and certain like the stubborn rose blooming outside. Delicate. Imperfect, but real. That evening, the world outside turned amber and still. The garage was quiet except for the faint hum of the radio and the rhythmic ticking of a clock on the wall. Elena sat on a stool near the workbench, watching Luke as he worked on an old car engine, his hands steady and sure, his face illuminated by the warm glow of a hanging bulb. Mia sat nearby, coloring, occasionally humming to herself in that sweet, distracted way children do when they're happy. Elena found herself mesmerized, not by the work itself, but by the man. There was a peace in Luke's movements, a groundedness that made her chest ache with something she couldn't name. In her world, everything was noise, deadlines, and pretense. Here, every moment was real, tangible. She could hear her own breathing, feel the quiet weight of the present. "Why do you fix cars?" she asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Luke paused. wiped his hands with a rag, and thought for a moment before replying. "Because it's simple," he said. "Machines break, you figure out what's wrong, and you fix it. No lies, no politics, just patience." Elena nodded slowly, her gaze lowering. "People aren't that simple, though." "No," he said softly, setting the wrench down. "They're not. But sometimes they just need the same thing. A little care, a little time, and someone who doesn't give up on them." His words hit deeper than she expected. For years, she had been surrounded by people who wanted something from her. Her money, her power, her name. No one had ever looked at her as someone broken who could be fixed. No one had cared to. "Do you ever wish for more?" she asked quietly. "More than this?" Luke looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Once," he admitted. "Before Mia. Before I realized more doesn't always mean better. Now I just want peace. And her to be happy." Elena smiled faintly, glancing toward Mia, who was now drawing a picture of the three of them. Luke, Mia, and a tall woman in a red dress with golden hair. Her chest tightened as she recognized herself in the child's crayon strokes. "She's lucky to have you," Elena whispered. Luke's voice softened. "I think I'm the lucky one." For a moment, they just looked at each other. The air between them was quiet, charged with something fragile. An understanding neither of them dared to speak. Mia hopped up and ran over to Elena, holding out her drawing proudly. "Look, it's us," she said. "You're smiling in this one." Elena took the paper, her eyes misting over. "It's beautiful, Mia." The little girl tilted her head curiously. "You're gonna stay, right? You don't have to go back to the big party place." Elena hesitated, her throat tightening. She glanced at Luke, searching his eyes for an answer she didn't even know she needed. Luke gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to decide right now," he said gently. "You can stay as long as you need." Her lips trembled into a smile. "Thank you." As night deepened, they ate dinner together. Soup Luke had made, simple and warm. Mia insisted on saying grace, thanking the stars for Daddy, Miss Elena, and the flowers. They laughed, and the laughter felt different this time. Real. Unguarded, like something healing had quietly begun. Later, when Mia fell asleep curled up on the couch, Elena stood by the open door, looking out at the night sky. The city lights glittered far in the distance, the life she'd built waiting for her return. But for the first time, the thought of going back didn't comfort her. It felt empty. Luke joined her at the doorway, his arms folded loosely. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "I don't remember the last time I felt this calm," she admitted. "It's strange. I'm used to chaos, control, noise." He smiled faintly. "Maybe you were never really living, just surviving." She turned to look at him, her eyes soft, searching. "And this? What is this?" He met her gaze, quiet but steady. "Maybe it's a beginning." Elena's breath caught. The wind brushed through her hair, carrying the faint scent of oil and flowers. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. The silence between them said it all. Two broken lives colliding by accident, finding something whole in each other. And as the stars shimmered above the old garage, Elena realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The next morning dawned softly, with light pouring through the open garage door like a quiet promise. The world outside smelled of dew and sunlight, and the sound of birds mixed with the distant hum of waking engines on the road. Elena stirred awake on the same old couch, wrapped again in that same blanket. But this time, her heart didn't feel heavy or uncertain. She sat up slowly, taking in the scene before her. Luke was already at work, bent over a car engine, his movements fluid and purposeful. His gray shirt was smeared with grease, and his hair was a little tousled from the morning breeze. Nearby, Mia danced around barefoot in her pajamas, her laughter echoing off the metal walls as she tried to feed a stray kitten from a bowl of milk. Elena smiled, warmth flooding through her chest. This garage, and once a strange, unfamiliar place, had started to feel like something she never thought she'd have again. Home. "Morning, sunshine," Luke said without looking up, his tone teasing. "You're becoming a regular around here." She laughed softly, standing to stretch. "I guess I am. You make it hard to leave." He glanced up then, and for a second their eyes met, just long enough for something unspoken to flicker between them. He looked away first, hiding a small smile. Mia ran up to Elena, clutching the kitten in her arms. Look, her name's Daisy, she said proudly. Elena knelt down, gently petting the tiny creature. Daisy suits her, she said warmly. She's beautiful. Mia's eyes shone. She likes you. Daddy says animals can tell when someone has a kind heart. Elena blinked, caught off guard by the sweetness of the words. Does he now? She asked, glancing over at Luke. Luke's voice came from across the room. I might have said something like that, he admitted, pretending to focus on his work. She chuckled softly, feeling her heart skip for reasons she didn't want to analyze. Hours passed in a comfortable rhythm. Luke worked. Mia played. Elena helped wherever she could, passing tools, folding rags, even wiping oil stains off the counter. The small acts of usefulness filled her with an unexpected joy. She was no longer the woman commanding boardrooms and wearing diamond watches. She was just Elena, a woman learning how to breathe again. But as the sun began to dip behind the rooftops, reality found her again, in the form of a phone vibrating insistently on the workbench. Her assistant's name flashed across the screen. Elena froze. The world of deadlines and shareholders she'd left behind suddenly felt very close again, tugging at her like an invisible chain. Luke noticed her expression. You should get that, he said quietly, not unkindly. She hesitated. If I answer, I'll have to go back. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then softly he said, Maybe you should go back, but only if you want to. Not because you're afraid not to. The phone kept buzzing. Her chest tightened. All her life, she'd been the woman who never hesitated, who made the hard choices and moved forward. But now, for the first time, she didn't know what the right choice was. Finally, she let the call ring out and die. Luke looked at her with quiet approval. You'll figure it out, he said. She turned toward him, her eyes soft, vulnerable. What if I don't want to go back to that world at all? He smiled gently. Then don't. The world won't stop spinning if you choose peace over power. Mia skipped over then, tugging on Elena's sleeve. Can you stay for dinner again? Daddy makes pancakes when he's happy. Elena laughed, wiping at the corner of her eye before it could turn into a tear. I'd love to. That night they cooked together. The garage smelled like sugar and coffee, and Mia danced around the table, giggling every time Luke flipped a pancake too high. They ate by the soft glow of a single hanging bulb, and it felt more magical than any chandelier-filled dining hall Elena had ever sat in. When Mia was finally asleep, curled up under her blanket, Elena stepped outside for air. The moon was low and full, washing the world in silver. Luke joined her quietly, standing beside her without a word. I used to think success meant never stopping, she said softly. But maybe it means learning when to. Luke glanced at her, his voice low. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't building an empire. It's letting yourself rest inside one moment. She looked at him then, really looked, and something inside her broke open. The walls she'd built around herself for years, the armor of perfection. All of it slipped away under the warmth of his gaze, and in that stillness, without words or promises, she felt it. That quiet, undeniable truth that somehow, against all logic, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning sun rose over the sleepy town, its golden light spilling softly through the open garage door. Dust motes danced in the air, and the faint scent of oil mingled with the smell of fresh coffee brewing. Elena sat at the edge of the couch, her suitcase beside her feet. She hadn't said the words out loud yet, but the heaviness in the air said it for her. She was leaving. Luke stood near the workbench, pretending to organize his tools, though he hadn't really moved anything for the last 10 minutes. His shoulders were tense, and every now and then his eyes flicked toward her, the woman who had stumbled into his quiet life and changed it in ways he hadn't expected. Mia, sensing something she didn't understand, sat beside Elena, clutching the small kitten Daisy to her chest. Do you really have to go? Mia asked, her voice soft and trembling. Elena swallowed hard, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I do, sweetheart. I have people waiting for me, a company that needs me. Mia's small fingers tightened around Elena's hand. But we need you too. That single sentence hit her harder than any business loss ever had. Her heart twisted painfully. She wanted to tell the truth, that she didn't want to leave, that for the first time in her life she had found a place that felt like home. But she was still Elena Voss, CEO of Voss Enterprises. The world didn't let women like her disappear into garages and gardens no matter how much they wanted to. Luke finally turned, wiping his hands on a rag that didn't need wiping. His voice was quiet. You don't owe me an explanation. I knew you'd have to go back eventually. She looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. It's not that I want to, she said, her voice shaking. But if I walk away from everything I built? He stepped closer, meeting her gaze. Then maybe you finally start building something for yourself. For a moment, they just stared at each other, two lives from different worlds, colliding in the space between what was real and what was right. Elena wanted to say something, anything, but her throat felt tight. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, pressing it into his hand. This is for you, she said. It's not payment. It's, thank you, for helping me when no one else would have. He didn't take it. You don't owe me anything, Elena. Her voice broke. Maybe not. But I owe you my heart for showing me what kindness looks like. Mia stood then, tears slipping down her cheeks. Will you come back? Elena crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. I'll try, baby. I promise I'll try. She hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of sunshine and crayons as if memorizing it. Then she stood, her legs trembling slightly, and turned toward Luke one last time. He gave her a small, bittersweet smile. Take care of yourself, Elena. Don't forget how to breathe. I won't, she whispered. Not anymore. As she stepped outside, the morning light wrapped around her like a goodbye. Her car was waiting by the curb. Black, sleek, the kind that fit her old life perfectly. She paused before opening the door, looking back. Luke stood in the doorway, his hands in his pockets, watching her with that same quiet strength she had come to admire. Mia waved from behind him, holding Daisy close. And in that moment, Elena realized that leaving didn't feel like the end. It felt like a beginning she hadn't yet learned how to name. Weeks later, the world of business swallowed her up again. Meetings, interviews, flashing cameras. But something was different now. She no longer felt hollow inside. The office plants she'd once ignored were now blooming. She found herself smiling at people more, listening more, and sometimes late at night she would glance at her phone and find a message from Luke. A picture of Mia holding Daisy, or a snapshot of a new flower blooming behind the garage. One evening, while staring out her penthouse window at the glittering city below, Elena picked up her keys and smiled to herself. Maybe some places weren't meant to be left behind forever. Maybe some hearts were worth driving back to. As the city lights blurred in her rearview mirror, Elena felt a peace she'd never known before. The quiet certainty that she was finally going home.